Today I'm hosting a collab called Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. And if you love chocolate, or German chocolate cake in particular, I've got the perfect solution for you here. This is my upside down German chocolate skillet cake. Comes together quickly and is so delicious. The caramel topping is optional, but does give you more of that German chocolate cake feel. But however you eat it, it's delicious. So if you'd like to see how this is done, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I'm a home cook, an amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today's video is part of a collab with a few other YouTube channels. We're all doing chocolate recipes. This is hosted by me, and it is for what I'm calling Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. Because we're all doing chocolates. It could be sweet, could be savory, but it has to be chocolate. So don't forget to go down to the description box and check out all of the other channels that are part of this collab. If you need a little chocolate in your life, we've got you covered. Now today is one of mine. I got the idea from watching some other YouTube videos that were making cakes in skillets. And they were cooking it entirely on the stovetop. I had a little bit of trouble doing that because I would cover the pan to make the little oven, but then all that condensation would make the top wet. And when I tried to flip it, which they did, it would break. So I had to come up with a solution for that and also keep it low in bites, points, and calories. And I've done just that. Now this is going to be for my upside down German chocolate skillet cake. I know it didn't say that on the thumbnail picture because I didn't really have a lot of room. But all that means is that we are going to cook the topping in the skillet before we add in the batter. But you will see all of that soon enough. Now I did want to give you a little background on German chocolate cake, which you may not know. First of all, it has nothing to do with Germany whatsoever. This didn't come from Germany. It wasn't created by a German chef. This is actually named after the chocolate that it was made with. In 1853, an American baker named Samuel German created a dark chocolate that he wanted to use in baking, and it became known as German's chocolate. It was bought from him by the Baker's Chocolate Company, which was part of General Foods and still is, I believe. They put it under their label, but it still does say German chocolate so that you know that's the one that you're getting, not just a regular semi-sweet or what have you. Now in 1957, an American housewife named Mrs. George Clay, sadly, we don't know her name because back then you were pretty much known by your husband, and that's how she was listed. And I looked around, I couldn't find her actual name, sadly enough. But she submitted the recipe to a local newspaper, and it was a big hit in that local area. Then the Baker's Chocolate Company got a hold of that recipe and thought it was great. It would definitely boost sales. So they sent it to other newspapers around the country, and it really did boost sales. Some say as much as 73% more than usual for the German's chocolate. Now, if you've ever had German chocolate cake, then you know that it's typically a layer cake. We're not doing a layer cake here. And it's also made with a frosting that is not caramel, although it does have that kind of texture. It's more of a custard, and it is egg yolks and evaporated milk cooked up and then combined with pecans and coconut. And then that goes between the layers and on top. Sometimes there is chocolate frosting on the sides of it, but we're not going through all that fuss. We're going for an approximation of those flavors. All right, so enough backstory. Let's go over the ingredients. I have here 1 cup of flour. Now you can sift that or not. I usually don't, quite frankly, but today I am going to sift it just to show you that it does help to incorporate a little bit easier without lumps. Here I have 1/2 cup of almond milk, and that is of course at room temperature. whenever you're baking, you want your ingredients at room temperature so that they come together more easily, but also so that everything is the same temperature when it goes into the oven and there aren't cold pockets anywhere. Here I have 1/4 cup of sugar replacement, and that's all we need, 1/4 cup. This isn't an overly sweet cake, but it is very tasty. Here I have 1/4 cup of unsweetened applesauce, and you could use pumpkin puree or even mashed banana, but I do like the extra moisture that I'm getting from the applesauce. Here I have 3 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder, and I am also going to sift that in because a lot of times chocolate can clump. Again, I don't normally do that, but sometimes it is better, especially with powdered chocolate, to sift it. But the way I add it in, you don't really have to, but we'll go over that when we get there. Here I have 1 egg, of course that's at room temperature. Here I have 1/4 cup or 30 grams of pecans, and I do weigh the nuts just because it's easier than trying to put them into a measuring cup and hope that the measurement is right with all those nooks and crannies that nuts have. So I prefer weighing them. Here I have 1/4 cup or 30 grams of coconut. Now I'm using sweetened coconut, which may be a surprise, but honestly, I've checked and compared unsweetened versus sweetened, and there is like maybe a 1 bite or point difference between the two. So it usually doesn't affect an entire recipe that much, so I'm okay with using sweetened, but unsweetened works as well. Here I have 1 tablespoon of brown sugar replacement, and that is going to help create a little bit of that caramelly flavor on top of our cake without adding any moisture that may affect the texture of the cake. Here I have 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and you could change up the extract a little bit. I wouldn't eliminate the vanilla altogether, but you could do half vanilla, half coconut if you wanted to boost up that coconut flavor a little bit. Here I have 1½ teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of light butter. Now the light butter I use is the I Can't Believe It's Not Butter Light. That seems to be the lowest in bites and points and calories and such. So that's the one I prefer to use, but just put whatever you're using into your recipe builder. Now over here I have some optional ingredients. Now that's actually 1 optional ingredient, just 2 versions of it. If you want to have more of a German chocolate flavor and feel, you might want to put a little drizzle of caramel on top. And the 2 options I have is the Smucker's sugar-free, and I also have the Walden Farms caramel syrup. This caramel syrup is a little bit looser, so it's a little bit more wet than the Smucker's. And the Smucker's, you can actually get away with 6 grams of the Smucker's and not use any bites or points, at least on the Healthy Better Balanced plan and the old WW Blue plan. That would be 0, 4, 6 grams. And 6 grams is actually a lot. I usually put my plate on the scale and just drizzle on to get 6 grams. And it really does enhance that German chocolate flavor, but you don't have to use it if you don't want. It's still great without it. All right, so those were all of the ingredients. Let me shuffle a few things around and we'll get started. All right, so the first thing I've done is I have an 8-inch skillet here, a non-stick skillet, and I've put my teaspoon of light butter in here and I'm getting that to melt. And once it's melted, you're going to spread it around the pan and up the sides a little bit, just to help us prevent sticking later on. And once that's melted, as it is there, I'm going to add in the brown sugar replacement. We're going to melt this down and let it become almost like a syrup. That'll just take a few minutes to get that melted down to where we want it. Now this is over medium heat. You don't want it too hot or it can burn the sugar or the nuts and coconut. And I did fail to mention, and when I showed them, they weren't chopped, but you do want to chop them up into fairly small pieces because you want them to spread out as much as they can in the pan. And having big pieces of pecan, it would make it a little too difficult to cut, as well as to get the pecan evenly distributed throughout. Okay, so now you can see our brown sugar and butter have melted into a syrupy consistency. So now what we're going to do is just add in our pecans and our coconut, and we're going to stir to coat with all of that sweetness and butteriness. And as I said, this isn't an overly sweet cake, so you still get some sweetness, but it's not cloyingly sweet, so I think you'll appreciate it. But you just want to break up any clumps of coconut that might be in there and get this all spread out and coated. And now we're just going to cook this for about 5 minutes just to help those nuts to toast a little bit and to get a little browning on the coconut. So 5 minutes and I'll be back. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes. And you can definitely smell the pecan and coconut, and that's what you want. That's activating the oils in each of those and giving us a little toastiness on those, which really boosts their flavor. Now, I'm going to turn off the heat and remove this from the heat. We can let that cool down a little bit. 2 things I wanted to mention. You could, if you wanted, just stop here and use this as a topping on some low sugar ice cream or what have you. Also, if you don't have an 8-inch oven-safe skillet, then you could use a 9-inch. You'll just want to check it, it will cook a little faster. Or what you could do is spray a cake pan. Once this is cooked, put it into the bottom and then continue with the recipe as I'm going to do it. But for ease, I just wanted to do everything in one pan. But we've got this part done. Now we're going to move on to the cake part. And over here I have a medium bowl with my whisk. I'm going to use a whisk for this. It really doesn't take a lot of work to get this incorporated, so you don't need an electric mixer. A whisk should be fine. And we're not going to be whisking it too much because we don't want to develop gluten once we add the flour. But what we're going to start with is I'm going to take the egg and I'm just going to break that up a little bit before I add in the other 2 ingredients, the sugar replacement and the salt. And I'm just going to whisk that together. Now, why am I adding in the sugar replacement with the egg? Because I want that evenly spread throughout, as well as the salt. And one of the best ways to have something spread throughout is to incorporate it into a liquid. So I'm just going to whisk that lightly. You don't have to whisk it too much. You just want to get it a little frothy. So you can see there are a few little bubbles there. That's exactly what we're looking for. Next goes in the almond milk, applesauce, and vanilla, and just whisk to incorporate all of that in here as well. And it's all incorporating very nicely because everything is at room temperature, so nothing's cold and trying to stay to itself. Now, the next step is we're going to put in the cocoa powder. Now, as I said, I don't always sift this and I've never really had a problem, but just so that I make sure you don't have a problem, I figured I would show you that I'm going to sift everything in so that it incorporates a little more easily and there's less to try to break up. But you can see the clumps of cocoa powder in there that are not wanting to go through, so you're just going to press those through with your finger and get that all incorporated. And then just whisk that in. Now, cocoa powder is what they call hydrophobic. It's not really afraid of water, but it just doesn't like incorporating with anything wet. So this will take a moment, and that is why I don't add in the flour with the cocoa powder, because I don't want to overwork the flour. But just keep whisking, scraping down the sides where some of the cocoa powder is going to want to cling. It does take a little effort, so just be persistent and just get it so that it is basically looking more like a liquid chocolate and there is no residual powder. Okay, and there we have it. That's nicely incorporated. Now I'm going to add in the flour. Normally I would mix the flour and baking powder together, but I found that I don't really need to with this. I'll sprinkle on the flour, and I just realized I was going to sift that flour in, but I didn't. It is what it is. And I'm going to top it with the baking powder. And then to mix in the baking powder to the flour, I'm just going to mix those two a little bit on the top. You don't have to worry too much. You just want a little mingling there, and then just whisk that in and scrape down the sides as you go and get all of that flour incorporated. Now that takes a little less time than the cocoa powder. Flour doesn't mind absorbing liquid like cocoa powder does. And there we have it. Even without using the sieve, I didn't have any problems incorporating the flour or getting lumps. So now I'm going to bring in my skillet and I'm going to push the coconut and pecan toward the center, but try to keep it in an even layer, because when I pour on the cake batter, it's going to want to push that out to the sides. So I'm going to just keep it in an even layer, but just move it in a little bit from the edge before I add in the batter. And that looks good right there. So now I'm going to take the cake batter, I'm going to scrape down the sides and make sure I'm getting all of this goodness in there. And what I like to do is kind of pour it around the outside first, if I can, and then go over the center. So just pour that in and then scrape down whatever is left in the bowl and get that all in there. And then I'm just going to spread this out gently in an even layer, make sure it's pushed out to the sides. And if any of the coconut and pecan starts to push out to the side, you can just use your spatula and kind of press that down underneath the batter once again. But there we have it. And I will wipe down any drips that may be on the edge of the skillet, just so those don't burn while it's in the oven. So now this is going into the 325-degree oven for about 18 to 24 minutes. It'll depend on your oven temperature. It'll also depend on how much moisture the flour absorbed. Sometimes if it's a very humid day, it might have more moisture in it. So that's why you usually have a little range there. But give me 18 to 24 minutes and I'll be back. All right, so there we have our German chocolate cake. Doesn't look like German chocolate yet, but it will once we flip it out. But for now, we have to let it sit in the skillet for about 7 to 10 minutes. You want this to firm up a little bit. Right now, it's like you've just gotten out of a jacuzzi and your body's all loosey-goosey. You want to let it sit for a while, let it get used to being out of the jacuzzi, and let it firm up. So about 7 to 10 minutes, and I'll be back. All right, so it's been about 10 minutes. What I'm going to do is just take my spatula and just kind of scoop around the edge so that I can loosen anything that might be sticking. But because I spread that light butter around the pan, it should be fine. Then I'm going to take the pan, put the cooling rack on top, and then flip it. And there we have German chocolate cake. Now no, this is not German chocolate cake as you typically know it, but it gives you those flavors and that sensation for far fewer bites, points, and calories than the real thing. So now what we have to do is just let it cool down for about 15 minutes before you serve it. As I said, a little drizzle of caramel will give you more of that German chocolate feeling, but it's really not necessary. Now this is going to make 8 servings, and each of those servings is just going to be 3 Better Balanced Bites or Old Blue Points. As I mentioned, I'm on the Healthy Better Balanced plan, which is the equivalent to the old WW Blue plan, and that is around where their current plan is. So those are the bites and points that I give. But if you were following calories, the calories for 1/8 of this delicious cake are 123. And if you are following macros, the fat is 5.2 grams, saturated fat is 1.7 grams, protein is 3.4 grams, carbs are 24.2 grams, fiber is 1.9 grams, and sugars are 2.3 grams for 1/8 of this cake. Now, if you add some caramel sauce, it may add a bite or 2 depending on how much you use, but as I mentioned, 6 grams of the Smucker's is going to be 0. And if you use the Walden Farms, you can have up to a 1/4 cup and it's still 0. But I hope that you enjoyed my part of this collab for Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. Don't forget to check out the other channels that are doing this collab. They are linked down in the description box, so go check them out if you wouldn't mind. And to help out my channel, if you wouldn't mind giving me the usual like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video, such as this one, which is coming up on a day I don't typically share a video. Now, this isn't the only cake that you can make like this. I have made the same cake, but put strawberries on the bottom, or on the top really, but on the bottom of the skillet. And I had success with that, although you do have to be careful when you're using berries or anything wet. It may alter the texture slightly of the cake. Also, I did want to mention, if you preferred to use granulated sugar replacement on the top, or even granulated sugar, you're only using a tablespoon, that is fine as well. I just wanted the brown sugar replacement because that way it gave it more of that caramel flavor that a German chocolate cake does have. Now, I have also been playing around with vanilla versions of this skillet cake. I did a lemon blueberry, which came out really well. I also want to do a coconut and see how that is. I'm sure it'll be fine. But you may be seeing a vanilla version of this coming up sometime soon on my channel. Now, the recipe for this, of course, is going to be on my blog. I will link directly to this recipe down in the description box. There's also a link to the blog itself if you're looking for any of my recipes. Just check there. And my Amazon storefront is down there. If I've used anything on the channel that you're interested in, whether it's food, cookware, or what have you, it may be there. Also down there is my social media if you'd like to follow me over there. I have my Instagram and 3 Facebook groups that I'm part of, so check out that description box for all sorts of information. But I am going to try to patiently await the cooling of this cake. Luckily, it's only 15 minutes. By now, about 10. So I will be having some of this soon, and I hope you will as well. So until next time, bye.